Welcome to the Restored Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Josh and Jaelyn Harrell.
We are a husband and wife who are passionate about partnering with people to rebuild, restore, and renew their lives to the purpose God has for them.
In 2018, God took our broken marriage and restored it to something beautiful, and we believe He wants to restore the parts of your life that seem broken too.
Join with us as we talk openly about what it looks like to walk out restoration in Jesus and what it means to let the cracks in our story become the greatest evidence of God's love for us.
This is Restored Living.
Vanilla pumpkin candle.
I think you could be, what's it called? Like a voiceover person.
Voiceover person.
Be the new Morgan Freeman.
Not Morgan Freeman.
In like all the documentaries.
There's just a few key reasons I couldn't be Morgan Freeman.
Why?
We need to work on your skills of deduction, my love.
I mean, yes, he is a classic, Mr. Morgan Freeman.
Class act, man. Welcome.
Welcome. If you know what... No, stop. You're going to give it away.
Like I didn't... It's a podcast. This isn't a live feed. No one's going to jump in the comments. What movie?
You can jump in the comments on Spotify, actually, if you didn't know. But we do have comments on Spotify.
True. You can leave comments.
That's how people let us know when we mess up and when we forget something.
That's okay.
And to tell us that they love us on occasion also.
Sometimes.
We actually don't get very many negative comments.
No.
I don't think.
Not
you guys
really.
are all pretty positive.
Pretty cool.
We love
cool
you.
Cats.
Oh, my
cool
ear's
cats.
itchy. Hold on.
So what happens when...
You know, like...
Just hit record without us actually knowing we're hitting
all
record.
right. Well, if you know us.
If you don't know us,
you don't
know
know
us
us,
now.
this is a weird
This is pretty much
podcast.
how we are. But we are Josh and Jaelyn Harrell. We are your hosts here on the Restored Living Podcast, and we are excited to be here with you guys for another week. This is our second episode back in the saddle, so to speak, after several months of a hiatus. So if you are seeing this and you're like, I didn't know you guys were back, you can go back to the last episode.
Here we are.
And
And
there's
this
a little
one's an
recap.
extra long. I mean, not extra long.
Like an hour.
This one's
probably.
a longer
Little
one
longer.
to stave you off for the next couple weeks because we will not be able to record this
We
next
will be in
coming week.
Canada.
Yeah. Fun
Oh,
facts.
Canada.
If you didn't know, I am Canadian, actually.
Born and bred. Well, just born. Really not bred. You were bred in the U.S.
I was fully bred in
she's,
the U.S.
She's a foreigner.
I am.
I like those foreign ladies.
Anyways, oh my gosh. All the Canadian jokes, just waiting for it. But yes, I was born in Lethbridge, Alberta. And yeah, I love my home country.
Everyone's always like, you're married to a Canadian? I'm like, I am.
So
I'm like, she lived there for
exotic.
less than 2 years, but I am married to
That's
a Canadian.
true. I really am an American.
You were there for like literally what? Well, it was right after your sister was born. You guys moved down, right?
Yep.
So you were like 18 months maybe when you moved.
Yep.
But
So
that 18 months runs
here I
deep.
am. Here we
Yep.
are. So we're gonna go
We're
visit
very
family.
excited.
We actually haven't seen the family we're gonna go see in like 5 years since
5.5
before
almost.
COVID. We
Mhm.
actually, it's funny.
Ugh.
Right before COVID,
Yeah.
we were
the story.
usually. Josh hates the story.
It's one of my bigger regrets.
It's like,
Regrets.
well, maybe telling you guys this will help you not make the same mistake because everyone says life is short and they're right.
Yes.
But I do think sometimes we make decisions without thinking about not what could happen, but I think we just don't fully think about the decisions that we make.
Yeah.
And so we decided to not go on a trip and for what seemed like a good reason.
Well, yeah, we were moving. So we had sold our home. We had moved into, this was 2019. We'd sold our home. We'd moved into an apartment and this apartment was not working out well for us. And we found a house that we could move into. And our lease was starting December 26th. So normally we would leave early in the morning on the 26th. And we had kind of a routine of going up to Canada for like a week to visit family.
Mhm.
And we decided in 2019 not to go because we were moving. And it was kind of, like we really wrestled over it, but we just decided we got to move and get settled in.
Mhm.
Well, we had no clue, obviously, what was coming 3 months later. And so for a few years, we weren't even allowed to cross the border.
Right.
And then in that
Even
time,
being, I was allowed,
you were allowed, yeah.
but no one else was.
But then we moved to Arizona and suddenly we weren't 6 hours away. We were a flight and a 3-hour drive away. So
Mhm.
we're really excited to get there and see everybody.
We have so we had a generation of all girls. And then now we have a generation of all boys.
Yeah, all
And
the
so
great grandkids are boys.
It's going to be such a fun
And there's
little reunion.
7 of them. So
It's
it'll
a
be
lot
a
of
lot
grand
of fun.
boys. A lot of grand boys. But
So,
anyways,
that's why this is a longer episode, because we won't be recording next weekend. We'll have to record when we get back.
we won't be bringing our stuff to Canada.
Absolutely not. It's a hard pass.
Enjoying our vacation.
Yes.
And I think that's important. We always feel like it's very important to model that to you guys on social media. The fact that it is really important to take breaks. And
Yep.
you guys saw us take a much needed break from social media. When we also do like to share parts of our life with you. So you might see us over on social, on Instagram. We're pretty much only on Instagram. We might be on
Yeah.
YouTube a little bit, but those
Yeah.
are kind of the main 2 platforms that we're on.
Yep.
And just updating you, Canada's beautiful. So if you've never seen
there'll
Canada,
be so many pretty photos. Lots of beautiful.
and it's a lot cooler than it is here in
Yes.
Arizona. So
Praise Jesus. Praise Jesus.
we do have a dog walking around in the background.
Sorry
and
in
his claws
advance.
are like so loud. So we have like a noise canceling going
But if you
on
hear
this
that,
podcast. But
that's
if
what
you
it
hear
is.
it, there you go.
So a couple little housekeeping before we jump in.
I
As
feel like
always,
we need a graphic that's
it's like housekeeping.
housekeeping.
Isn't that from Father of the Bride?
I don't
Doesn't he
know.
say that?
If you know, comment.
Franz. What's his name?
Comment
Is
that
that
you
his
know.
name? I don't know. Anyway, okay.
There
Off
is-
track. Focus.
Okay.
So housekeeping rules. Couple of things. Here we go. First thing being, we announced last week during our podcast, and we haven't talked about it much in the past, but we will be talking about it more moving forward, is that we have partnered with a really amazing ministry, a nonprofit called In Focus Ministries. Their mission is to help smaller ministries that are kind of grassroots ministries get up and going, which Restored Living very much is that. We have been doing this by and large by ourselves for the last few years. And that includes investing in all of our trainings for our trauma-informed coaching, which we'll be finishing up next month, which we're super excited about, as well as all of the equipment and stuff that we need to do the podcasts, all the editing, things like that. So we have partnered with them. And in that partnership process, we are working more intentionally on finding people who want to partner with the ministry. And so what that means is that, one, we always ask that if you think of us during the times where you're praying, that you would just pray for this ministry, what the Lord's doing, that you pray for our family and just protection over us, our marriage, our kids, because we know that anytime that you're doing any kind of work that is advancing the kingdom of God, that is focused on people becoming more healed and whole in Christ, that there's going to be spiritual warfare that comes with that. And we have bore witness to that many a times, and God's been so gracious with us. The second thing that we ask is if you are able and willing to partner with us financially in any capacity, we would so greatly appreciate that. We have options for people to do monthly or one-time giving. And the other thing is, because we partnered with this kind of parent ministry, all of your donations are tax deductible. So, for you, that just makes a difference because you can put in your taxes as nonprofit giving, kind of like you would with your church or any other nonprofit that you might give to. But all that to say, if you found the work that we're doing here, if you're one of those people who has messaged us on Instagram and said, oh my gosh, your podcast has just been really refreshing or helpful, or it's been helpful to give to a friend, we just ask that you would consider giving to us financially. If that's like $5 a month, $10 a month, that's amazing. If you're somebody that's like, hey, I actually can give more than that, that would be incredible. If you just have a one-time gift you want to give, any of those things help as we continue to invest in resources, as we start partnering with churches in the local area and start to develop more content for you guys, things like courses and things that can actually be taken and just placed into your churches as helpful tools or your communities. All of your giving goes towards that. And so we just really appreciate that as you guys think about that and consider partnering with us in that way. So
yeah, and eventually we will have more resources that are available to our donors that aren't available to everybody for free or for a discounted rate. Exclusive content. Yep. Kind of like Patreon, but a little bit different. And so we do want the Restored Living community, if you really want to be a part of that community and are a part of our community, we want you to be involved in all of the different ways. Yeah. So if you would consider that, that would be awesome.
And at the end of the podcast, you'll see a little kind of screenshot in like the outro. It will have the URL for you to go to. I think it's
restoredliving.org/give.
Give. Okay. Give. It's give, not giving.
Give.
Okay.
Give.
And then
I made it simple.
You can click the link on there and it will take you to our, essentially our landing page on In Focus Ministries website where you can give, and it gives some pre-suggested donations. But again, you can do one-time recurring, whatever amounts are doable for you. we just ask that you would consider that. So that's what we'll say about that for now.
Yep.
Other than that, we always ask if you find any of what we share today or in any previous episodes helpful for you, if it's just encouraging you in your walk with the Lord, if it's encouraging you in your own process of healing, we just ask that you would share it, whether that's sharing it in your stories, whether that's texting it to a friend, whatever it might be. You just know a lot of people we don't know, and we just want this to reach who it does, and that's what we always ask the Lord when we pray before each of these episodes, is that this would just reach who it's meant to reach, and that it would touch the hearts of those who he wants to use it for. And so we just trust that he'll do that. And sometimes that might be through you. So
it's always through you guys.
It is. Any other things you think of, love, that we need to touch on?
No, I think I just I'm sitting here super grateful, and just like what's coming over me is like the different people's stories that we've heard that have come from us sharing our story. And so as I share my story today with you guys,
the long awaited,
if you didn't check out Josh's version of his story, please go check that out. It's just a couple episodes old. You can check that out on YouTube, Spotify, all of those things. And I actually might share some clips this week.
Yeah, we'll probably share some of both. Yeah,
it would be. I think it would be cool.
They were meant to be a back-to-back, and then life.
They were meant to be a back-to-back, and then life. But the Lord always has plans for when He wants to release things, and we are very Spirit-led with this podcast on purpose, because we feel like the Lord is going to do this work, not us. And so, as we record, we've just been praying all day that there would be the story that you need to hear. And that is always my prayer, that we would get out of the way and that the Lord would speak volumes, because He's done such a work in our lives. And as much as I was just a Christian sitting in church and had a good marriage and kids and all of those things, I was not okay. And I didn't really realize how not okay I was until the Lord illuminated this story for me. And so I hope that if you are in that same place where you're like, well, that's not so bad, and like, I wonder what story I have from the Lord. Who knows?
Well, let's dive right into it. So this will be very much me just asking Jay questions and her sharing. I might share things occasionally, but this is...
Oh, we know you're going to add your 2 cents in to housekeeping.
So the first question that came to mind for me when you were saying that was, when did you first recognize for yourself that something wasn't okay? Like, was there a moment or a particular time in your life and in our relationship that you noticed that something was just not okay?
That's a good question, because I think sometimes we can go about life and just be so unbothered by anything. And that was very much my life. I kind of thought I could handle the things that came into my life. I didn't have any like big T traumas, if you would call it that, right? Like, I just kind of had my life. I'd always known the Lord. In a little bit of background on my story, I have this one moment I can remember very vividly. It's my first memory, and it's actually a memory of me almost dying. And it's also a memory of great faith. So I was at our apartment complex that we lived at, and me and my sister are 16 months apart. So when I was 3, she was like 1.5. And so my mom was a ministry wife at the time, and my dad was working overtime in youth ministry, and she was raising us at home, which is no small feat when you have 2 kids under 3, right? And so we were at the apartment pool. I didn't know, when you live in Oregon, you don't really like know how to swim.
Half the time you don't learn.
Yeah. I mean, the water comes from the sky, not the ground. So you're just, and I love water. I think water is so great. I've always loved water. Even to this day, I love water. I played water polo in high school. And so I've always had a love for the water, and I loved swimming. And my mom knew that. And she told me, hey, don't go in. I've got to go attend to your sister. Don't go in the water. And I actually didn't purposely go in the water. I slipped and fell in the water. And I did not know how to get up. And to this day, this is why I know how to swim. I know my kids know how to swim really young. Like Caden is 2 and he knows how to swim. Like there's just so much. And it's not out of a fear. It's out of a wisdom, so to say. So when I was in that hot tub, obviously I was terrified, right? I saw bubbles. I didn't know it. I was like, is someone going to come save me? Like, it was a long time. And this man in a white t-shirt and blue jeans pulled me up out of the water and set me on the side. And my mom rushed over to me and was like, are you okay? How did you get out? Like, who saved you? And I was like, well, that man over there, that man in a white t-shirt, blue jeans. There was no man that was there. But as I grew up, my mom told me a story from her childhood. So when she was 9, she was in the basement of their farmhouse and doing farmhouse things, singeing chickens, because that's what you did. Like, you grow the chickens and you gather the meat yourself, you know? So they're singeing a chicken. You have like the gasoline and a match, and you're lighting that to singe the chicken feathers off so that it makes it all clean and easy. And the explosion for the gasoline happened, and my mom was really close to the explosion, and it did not go as planned. And so my mom got burned on over 3/4 of her body, 2nd and 3rd degree burns. They had to rush her to the hospital. The nearest one was like 35 minutes away. My grandma always tells the story about how fast she drove and what she was thinking about and all of those things. And while my mom was healing, when you get skin grafts on your skin to help, heal your burn scars, it is very susceptible to infection. And so a lot of times when my mom was in the hospital room, she wasn't allowed to have anyone with her. And if you know my mom, she's like me.
Socialite that she is.
Yeah, she loves people. Yeah. And she would, in her hospital room, see this man in a white t-shirt, blue jeans, who would keep her company when she was all alone in that hospital room. And she always talks about how that was her friend or her angel. And when my mom told me that story, I was just like blown away at like, that's what I saw. And from that moment when I was 3, I have always had a really strong faith. Like, I knew God was real and you couldn't tell me because I wouldn't be here.
Right.
If it wasn't for that.
Yeah.
And so that moment really shaped a lot of who I was. But the part I didn't know was it also shaped the fears that I would have all throughout my life. Right. I kind of always walked away from that traumatic event. I didn't really realize it was a traumatic event. I just thought that's something that happened to me. But our brains have this really interesting ability to remember good stuff to keep us safe and not fearful. But our bodies hold the trauma, right? And so from that moment on, I learned kind of 2 things. 1, I was like, God is absolutely real. 2, the other belief that I had that was very much a root belief in my life was I have to keep myself safe because no one else will. And that was really kind of the starting point of my story in a nutshell. Was just, it was up to me. If I was going to do it, it was going to be up to me.
Yeah. That's like, and I remember the first time you realized that connection of, because she had told me that story several times and I'd heard you tell it several times. And the way you tell it now is so different because it was always about how it just instilled this faith in you and it just gave you this assurance that God was real. But there was part of it you had never tended to and really recognized. So fast forward then to that, that being kind of your model for life and how you approach life. When did you in your adulthood start to see some of those core root beliefs that moment created for you start to like bubble up? When did you start to realize that maybe things inside of you weren't as okay as you thought they were?
Yeah, I think I was constantly looking in my childhood for someone to take care of me. And a lot of times I looked for that in men. So wanted relationships super early. part of that was I just didn't quite trust my mom. I think underlyingly, I didn't know it at the time, but, you know, I just was very, I wanted someone to take care of me. That was very important to me. But I also did all of the things that I could to only take care of myself and not let anybody take care of me. It was really wild. And so in my adulthood, that showed up as being really independent and really, what's the word for it that starts with an S? Strove is not a word. I like to strive, I guess. That's probably the best way to say it. I would look for recognition. I would look for any opportunity to make myself something. And so lots of independence, even in our marriage. You know, we got married young at 20, and that part of that young marriage was when I found Josh, I knew that he was going to take care of me. And he did such a great job at taking care of me in so many ways. And I still do believe that a lot of our marriage, like, God knew we needed each other in so many ways, even though we were both really hurting and really broken.
Yeah.
But I was just like this wounded person coming into our marriage, and I had no idea I was bleeding out, you know, like.
I don't think either of us did.
No.
Yeah.
No, I was like, I'm good. I got this together. And my biggest problems, I felt like at that point, were that I was overweight and like needed to deal with that, but wasn't sure how to deal with that, and was working with the Lord on how to do that, you know, those types of things. But it created this hyper independence for me of, like, even in our marriage, I know it caused so much conflict where I would want Josh to lead in our marriage, but I would not let him lead at all. Like, I had an issue. Like, I needed to be in control of every situation, yet, you know, in that place of wanting to be in control, I also didn't at the same time. It was like just a war in myself.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard when you want to be cared for in a certain way, but you have learned, whether, you know, even inadvertently early on, that you are responsible for caring for yourself.
Right.
So it's like your heart and your mind want one thing, but your body is telling you another thing. And so anytime you try to let people take care of you, there's just this immediate distrust of people being able to do it, or people following through, or whatever it might be. And so then you had this, like you said, like a war inside of you between the two of, like, I'm really independent. I can do everything for myself, which you could. Like, I remember oftentimes we'd have conversations where it was like, I can help you. And you're like, I got it. even if that wasn't the exact conversation, that was the undertone, right? It was like, you were really, really good at doing it. You know, for years. I mean, you built a really successful business doing it. You know, accomplished like dreams and goals that you had doing it, but it also left you with like this void of wanting to be cared for. And I remember we'd have conversations where you just like, I just want to feel taken care of. And I remember being like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know how to, I don't know what I can do to help that, you know? And that was because I hadn't worked on some of my things either. And so we both were, like you said, bleeding out, and neither, you know, no one's realizing it. So
yeah, that tension felt kind of spinning. I remember, like, it was like we were just missing each other all the time. And we were so focused on like fixing the problems that we didn't realize that there was actually reasons for what we were seeing, the fruit that we were seeing. And I think that all came to a head when you confessed about your same-sex attraction for the first time. And that kind of just broke me.
Yeah.
I mean, it just was, I was like, oh shit, now I have a problem. Like, I kind of felt like I had gotten by this life unscathed. Like, I had a great family system. I had, you know, growing up, like, nothing really bad happened to me. Like, I wasn't like raped, or, you know, like, I wasn't physically abused, or I wasn't, you know, all of these things. And, but when you confessed about your same-sex attraction, I was like, how are we gonna stay married? Like all of the thoughts.
Yeah.
And I still, to this day, I can remember the place in the house.
Yep. Oh yeah.
I can remember
That
the place
living
in the
room.
house. I can remember the couch. I can remember, I remember how old our kids were at the time. They were very little.
Yeah, they were like 3.5
and 1.
and yeah, I'm 1.
Yep. And just so not what I thought this was good, like my life was going to be.
Yeah.
You know, but I also knew something was really wrong. Like,
right.
We were not connecting in our marriage. Sex was always hard.
Yeah.
Like just, and not just on a level of like, you know, and I'm saying this, I want to be very careful with how I talk about this because obviously our life is private also.
Yeah.
But, you know, there were reasons from my childhood because I actually was sexually abused when I was growing up in my childhood in high school. But I had no idea that I was sexually abused in high school. I actually wouldn't have called it that.
Yeah.
So sex was always something very hard for me in our marriage. And so I kind of just saw us struggling with sex like, oh, dang it. Like, this is like, shouldn't this be easier? And when he confessed that, I was kind of like, well, that's the issue. Like, there's
our problem.
And I want to be really clear about the fact that I got real mad when I started to look up how to help him with this situation, how to help him. I was very codependent too. But I was looking up how can we stay married and have the same-sex attraction be a thing? Does this mean we need to get divorced? What does this look like in the church? And so I searched online for books after books after books. And this is back in 2018. There were no books. There was no talking about this. Like the topic of same-sex attraction was such a taboo topic in the church. And so I think that was why Josh had not said anything for all of these years because we grew up in the church together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say even for all the progress we've made as the church globally, you know, it's still not a topic that we just want to make it about something that it's not about. And yeah. And so it's just, you were finding yourself with like no resources, no voices to listen to, no wisdom, no guidance. It was like, I mean, it was just this complete floor falling out from underneath.
Well, and the majority of what I found was stuff on betrayal. And so I just kind of hung on to that. Although when you do have a partner who struggles with same-sex attraction, and they can be a man or they can be a woman, they're both are very true and very much happening in the church. Just want to point that out. When you are the spouse that hears about that, there are some extra nuances to that. But you kind of don't know where to start. And so I started with betrayal. I started with, you know, Sex Addicts Anonymous. I mean, all of the things.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing on a podcast that I was listening to, someone telling their story that they were like, I had so much work to do and I had no idea. And I'm so grateful for all this has taught me. And it immediately got me so mad. I was like, I am a victim here. He cheated on me. And I say that sometimes I have to go back in that because now I know that it is true. There was so much in me that needed to change. It wasn't that it was my responsibility or that I could have stopped any of this from happening, but this process of him working through his addiction and him recognizing his struggle with sexuality and what that has stemmed from, and understanding more of his story and all of those things, a beautiful thing blossomed in me of learning the same things. Right. And I think that is the part I'm very thankful to my my younger self for is just being open to looking at myself.
Yeah.
And not just being mad, but recognizing, okay, like what it feels like when you are betrayed is like you've been shot. You have been shot by a bullet and you have to heal yourself. Like you have to heal. You have to get the bullet out. You have to go to the doctors. You have to do the therapy. You have to do all of those things in order to heal because you have been wounded.
Yeah.
And that sucks, man. Like, I just got to tell you, it sucks to be hurt.
Yeah.
And my life is peppered with being very hurt. And we can't just skip to Sunday.
Yeah.
We can't. Like, we have to be able to grieve the woundedness. And I think that's so important in the betrayal community. Like, we want to just rush to a solution and we want to just fix the problem and fix our marriage and do these things. And the reality is we need to be okay with recognizing our woundedness and being able to feel it fully. Because I will tell you that ability to be in the Saturday of life, and I'm talking about like the resurrection times, right? Like Friday, Jesus died. Saturday, everybody was mourning. It was just a day of mourning, and no one had hope that he was going to rise on day 3. Like, we don't know. They didn't know what we know now, right? Yeah. And Sunday, he was risen. Yeah. Like, it was incredible, but it was incredible because of the grief on Saturday. And if you are a person who's struggling with betrayal in your marriage or in your life, do not sacrifice your Saturday. Don't do it. I am restored today because of the woundedness that I have in my life. Because God was able to go into all of those places, not because I ignored them, but because I said them out loud. And I said, Lord, here they are at the altar. Like, I am a victim of sexual abuse. I am a victim of infidelity in my marriage. I'm a victim of all of these things, Lord, but I can't hold these anymore. I can't make them change. I can't. I have to give them to you. And that is why Restored Living is what it is, because the Lord really did take us on a journey of doing the work of rebuilding ourselves, right? In our own individual stories and in the marriage relationship that we had and the other relationships we had. And then there's the work that God does, where he comes into those places when we surrender them to him and we don't just try and fix it on our own. Because I did that, y'all. I tried everything I could to fix myself because that's what I did my whole life. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious when did you start to see that transition from I'm going to fix this to I can't fix this and choosing something different? When did you start to really see a dramatic shift in that piece of your kind of story and identity where it's all up to me? I have to keep myself safe. I've got to fix things. When was the season or the time that you saw that the Lord really start to kind of uproot that?
Yeah, I want to say it was right as soon as we started doing our work. It was not.
I knew that would be your answer.
It's like, my story. I don't know.
It's like I've lived it with you or something.
It took me 4 years of working in therapy because I was very focused on him, and you can tell my language has been very focused on him. And that's where I tried to go back into how I felt at that time, because I was very focused on how do we get Josh better? How can I support him? How can I do those things as a supportive wife? How do I take care of my family? How do I run my business still while dealing with all of this stuff? And God's so gracious in letting us go in baby steps through our healing. I think I wanted to be healed in 6 months. And I remember telling, my counselor, Tara Matson, she's amazing. She's an amazing therapist, and Living Wholehearted is great. So livingwholehearted.com. They're excellent. We love them.
To them.
And they are a huge reason why Josh and I are here today. You know, like I will give them full on credit for the things that we learned, the individual and couples counseling that we went through them was just a huge part of our journey. And I'm thankful for it. Good counselors, good Christian counselors that help you get to the root of things. Right.
Yep.
And so, I remember her asking me, she asked me, how long do you think this is going to take to feel better? And I was like 6 months to a year. And she was like, you know, like counselors and therapists do. And she's like, this is a long journey. And I did not really want to hear it. But I kind of was like, yeah, you're right. You know, like totally. A year.
I get that.
And now I look back 6 years and I understand why it's a long journey. And it's still a long journey for us. Like it's peeling back one layer of the onion every time, because if you really did heal in 6 months, you would hurt yourself in the process. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just not.
It's too much. Too much to look at one time.
Expect a whole lifetime of hurt, because the reality is this wasn't, when it all came down to it, this wasn't just about one central thing in our marriage. I think there was a moment of implosion centered around the topic of sexuality that revealed a whole underlay of stuff that we had. It was like the final crack in the pot. Yeah. And it all shattered. And then we were like, oh, there's so much here. There's so much here.
Yes.
But I don't think in the moment, we just all we saw was this thing in front of us.
We saw the same-sex attraction. We saw.
And we just,
the crises.
Yeah. There was so much crisis, and that is natural for your brain to go into this mode of like, how do I deal with this crisis right now? Yeah. But yeah, it was such wisdom from her to just be like, this is going to be a long time. And not in like a doomy way, but just in like just
prepare yourself,
just settle in to life, because life, this is the whole journey of life. It's the whole journey of walking with Jesus, is that every season he reveals new things that need his touch. Yeah. And I don't think we could have known in the moment, or could have handled what that meant.
Yeah. And I will say, you know, when I really started to take a look inward was maybe 2 years ago. It really is very fresh.
Around the time of like Caden's conception.
Just after Caden. Yeah. So less than 2 years ago. That's true. I should use accurate timelines here. It can feel like a long time, I think, when you're in the middle of it. But for what I will say is, while, you know, in this last 6 years, 5 of those years were me trying to make sure our marriage didn't fall apart.
And me trying to make sure that I could do everything right so that it wouldn't fall apart.
Right.
So it was very like control. There wasn't much surrender.
It was trying to strive to make everything fit. Right. We were letting God into some parts, I think.
Oh, well, yeah. I think that there was definitely aspects of healing that happened in that time from like 2018 to 2022. But I do agree with you that we very much were like, how do we manage the crisis? And then how do we quickly turn this to a good thing?
Right.
Like, how do we then turn this messy season of our life into something that is more of a testimony, right? Like, we wanted so badly to get to that point where it was like, we're on the other side of it. And that was more our goal than
right. I remember
healing.
Hearing you say, because you didn't want to struggle with same-sex attraction. That was never something that you wanted.
No.
You know, and we did have some people who would, you know, tell Josh that he needs to just follow his heart and do all of these things and leave our family. And
people who said they love Jesus too.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
I mean, it was really surprising. And people don't understand same-sex attraction, right? If you're not in the middle of it, you don't understand all the nuances of it. And we do meet with couples who struggle with same-sex attraction because there isn't a lot of resourcing out there for
And
help in that area. And so
you just feel like a bit of an outsider, especially in the church world.
You do. Well, when no relationships are safe, essentially.
Well, right, because you naturally aren't supposed to in the church culture be friends with the opposite gender because there's risk there. But then if same-sex attraction in some form is a part of your story and your experience, then suddenly the same sex is no longer safe either. And so you're left very, very isolated typically.
Yep.
And for the spouse, it's very isolating because you are married to someone who, in a lot of ways, is attracted to something you can't ever be. And I remember that being like for you a point of contention. And for several years, I don't think so much anymore, but for several years that was like a big thing, which is like, I can't ever be this.
Right. Yeah. There wasn't a competition like I would imagine there is with, I knew I couldn't compete with a man. Like there's no competition there. I'm not a man.
Right.
And so I never really took that part on myself, but what I did do was I didn't focus on my own healing all the way. And it was funny. You guys have heard our story about the year of 2022. And, if you want to go back to listen to that, I don't know exactly what episode it is.
Just go back a little bit.
Go back and listen to it. I think it's the deliverance episode. It has deliverance in the title.
Yeah. It does.
We tell the story of Josh's deliverance. And that really was the starting of me being able to have the space to focus on my own healing. Yeah. And that's a really important thing. Right. So I think when you are a spouse of someone who is betrayed, it's easier to focus on other people's stuff than your own. And although you are like, you're kind of hanging out and like working on your own stuff, you kind of are like, well, I'm strong and I'm this and I'm that. And you kind of live in that zone of like, well, I have it all together. You know, like I've survived this. And survival is a huge theme of my story. And, you know, from when I was a 3-year-old in a hot tub, you know, so I have to survive. And that is also one of the most damaging things that you can be in for long periods of time is that place of survival, because there will always be a time where you can't save yourself. Right. And you need help and you need to be held and you need to be taken care of. And so it was funny when he told me about his infidelity this last time and how the Lord had delivered you. I had always kind of felt like in previous times when Josh had confessed, and this happens a lot in addiction relationships.
Especially when you're dealing with like pornography, right? Because there's like, when it's an ongoing addiction that is not, the root's not being found out, there's like multiple times of confessing. And so it's just this repeat process over and over again.
It's super painful for him and super painful for me to hear. And so actually early on, people don't know this, some people don't know this, but early on in our therapy, our therapist suggested, because Josh had a problem with lying, she suggested that he get a polygraph test.
Yeah.
And to this day, I think that is something that is so wise for couples to do who are going through situations like this.
Yeah.
Because
especially if there's a habitual pattern of deceit, right? Because the person who's lying is stuck in a pattern for some reason of lying, whatever that is.
And it wasn't really conscious that you were doing it.
No, it was so second. I mean, it was so second. I wouldn't say it was never conscious, but it was so second nature a lot of times because I was in such a survival and protective mode of trying to keep a certain image up and be, you know, I felt like if I fall apart, I am like your support. So then you're going to fall apart. So there was a lot of those pieces of like, I can't let this image kind of crumble because that's going to cause the whole unit to fall apart.
Yeah. But that honesty and there were so many things that happened from that polygraph that I think gave me a sense of safety. And then I think gave you the sense of like appropriate consequences. Like, hey, I'm actually, you know, like this is not okay what I'm doing. And because there is like a form of when you're in the middle of that addiction and your brain's kind of just responding out of survival, there is a sense of mindlessness that you're kind of going about doing things to a point.
Yeah.
And there's a truth that your brain is telling you that isn't actually reality.
Right.
And that polygraph kind of like woke both of us up to like, no, this is actually really serious.
Right.
And needs to be addressed. And so when Josh told me about his deliverance, it was funny. I told him I had a really strong boundary that if he broke the boundaries that I had, that we would be done. And
I knew that.
And he knew that.
Well. Through all of what happened in 22, I knew that. So when I came to her in February of 23, I was very aware of what was being put on the table.
Yep. And I was thankful that I had all the tools that I had in my tool belt, because it is not easy to enforce your boundaries. It's not. And I was even kind of in my brain after that last year, there was a lot of separation that the Lord had kind of done between.
We were pretty emotionally separated for 2022.
Yes. Yeah.
I would say, like, we lived in the same home. We celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, went on dates, but emotionally we were very disconnected.
Very disconnected. And I was going through so much with, my own, like, what do they call it when it's during your pregnancy?
Interpartum.
I
don't know.
I was depressed while I was pregnant.
Yeah.
And so it was like me and God, and I was struggling so much. I mean, so much.
And I was totally unavailable to you emotionally, because I was in a
war with yourself.
Spiral.
Essentially.
I was in a pretty like manic depressive spiral. And so there was no being codependent on one another, because we couldn't.
No.
Neither of us could depend on the other.
And I actually think that was very much the Lord's saving grace in that. Like, he was allowing that separation. And we do believe, as a married couple who's gone through all the things that we've gone through, there's definitely a space for separation. Like, and there should be.
And I think if you hadn't been pregnant during that time, we probably would have. I would imagine I think there was a sense of, I don't know what could have happened, but I think it's, for all intents and purposes, we had.
I would agree with you. I think if I hadn't gotten pregnant, we were definitely in that space. Yeah. Starting 2022, where I was like, I don't know if we're going to stay married or not. Cause I don't feel like he's really healed.
Yeah.
And I think he's still really struggling with some things, and it's just not safe for me. Yeah. Right. And so the writing was kind of on the wall. I never really felt safe. And when he came to me and he confessed these things, and it wasn't about what he said, but I just took a check in my spirit, and the Lord was like, you need to forgive him. I was like, I am not forgiving him again. There was just a part of me that was like, oh, you are asking me to do this, aren't you? And I did forgive him through tears. I'm like, just so baffled by what God's doing in my heart, because I literally felt no anger. Like, it was a repeat of, and you just feel overcome with the gift that the Lord gave you through Jesus dying on the cross. When you truly forgive someone and they don't deserve it, like, that forgiveness is just as helpful to the person you're forgiving as it is to yourself. And that moment of forgiveness, I told Josh, I remember saying, I think I can breathe again. And
the days that followed that were very different from our days that followed 2018.
Yeah, because for the first time, I could tell he was being honest, and I could tell that he was, that something had changed in him. Like, he was not going back from these things. And the human part of me was like, well, I need you to prove it, to show me that these things, so there was healing that had to happen from that. But it really started me on the journey of recognizing what I really like, taking care of myself, because for so long I had not had not had the safety in our own marriage, first of all. And I think that just takes time. like if you have a spouse who is struggling with trauma and like struggling with addiction and
mental illness,
you both are like drowning. Like you can't help each other, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes there does have to be that give and take of like, hey, your trauma is big. I don't have trauma, which is not true. You know, and that's what happened in our story. I was like, well, I don't really like, I have stuff I need to work through, but it's not as big as your stuff.
And do you think that was because you genuinely believed at the time it wasn't as big, or do you think that your body knew it was big trauma, but you didn't feel safety, like there was space for it?
So,
or do you think it was a little bit of both?
Knowing what I know now, I honestly don't, like, my brain didn't compute that I had been traumatized.
Like
the way
consciously you weren't aware of it.
No, not at all. I really did think, hey, I'm good. You know,
you've got the problems.
You've got the problems. And I think over the 6 years, I've become more aware of the problems that I did have. But when I had the space and the safety, and not that he's been done healing or anything, I'm not saying that. You don't have to wait till your spouse is done healing to recognize that you need help. I think I was also humble enough to be in the space where I'm like, I don't have it all together. I need a lot of help.
Yeah.
Like, I am in crisis.
And I saw you embrace help and have seen you embrace help in a very new way in the last 2 years prior to kind of our life before. Right? Like our life before.
Our previous life.
Caden's like our mile marker for, I think, a big transition of our life where we were one way before he came into our lives, and the Lord did something crazy in the transition of him.
Yeah.
But I've seen a much different willingness to accept help with very little, not just accept it, but ask for it when you need it, you know, like actually asking for what you need and being okay and actually really glad to receive the help. Not always, but certainly more often than before.
Yeah. It's funny, like the last 2 years have been so healing, you know, like there has been a stark, you know, 180 from where I was 2 years ago to who I am now.
Yeah.
And I'm still very much in the early stages of it too. And I know that. So I don't come to you like fully healed.
It's like that verse we just heard in church today where Paul's like, I have not yet reached, right? Like I am pressing forward.
Yep. Then James 4. 7
through 11.
Yeah, I think so.
Watch it be totally
Bible
wrong.
That. I don't have my phone with me. Otherwise I would. Oh no, I do. Wait, Bible.
You keep talking. I got it.
Yeah, it's so funny. Some of you guys have noticed in some of the earlier episodes, I am much heavier than I was then. And part of that I'm learning was me just trying to adapt and cope in different methods of behavior modification, right? So when I was growing up, I was always a heavier girl. I kind of went to food for comfort and desired food for comfort because I desired comfort, period. And as I grew up, obviously, like that maladaptive coping mechanism of going to food for medicine was just not working.
Philippians 3:13 through 14.
Oh, never mind. We were very
a different
wrong.
reference to James at church. We just flipped those. It's fine.
It's fine.
Anyway, either way. But continue.
So I actually swung the pendulum from overweight, dealing with things with food, to fixing my weight, realizing that losing weight doesn't fix your life, and became a health coach. And God did so many things not on me. God did so many things with that pendulum swing that were really, really good. Things that I realized, you know, the Lord does have a purpose for my life, whereas I didn't really feel like who would listen to the fat girl, you know. That was kind of my viewpoint of, I just had a very low self-esteem about myself. was always nervous about what Josh thought about me as a wife and all of those things. And when I lost the weight, my self-confidence was back, and there was so many beautiful things about it. And I felt so strong because I had accomplished so many things. And losing 95 pounds was just like, wow, how did I I did that, you know, like there was a pride in that I held to myself. And what I didn't realize was, yes, that accomplishment was great, but it doesn't actually make you happy. So then you're continually working towards higher up the ladder, so to speak. And so I would just constantly be working on my body because I knew I could do that. And
there was a constant, you were in a environment that really fed that desire, and fed the results that you could create too, to where, and you were very performance driven and very action oriented, which are not bad things. They were like a little more consuming. And so you did really well at that.
Right. And I think where you see behaviors become unhealthy are when they are rooted in a belief that actually is not real. It's something that you've made up, or it's something that's planted itself in you, and we don't actually know that that's the thing that's talking. And so for years, I just never felt good enough.
Yeah. I mean, even at your strongest, leanest, thinnest, you just nitpicked every little part of your body.
And I still have photos that like go around in my phone where I'm at those weights, and I look back at it now and I'm like, man, it's not that I didn't appreciate it. I did. I appreciated my body where it was at. Appreciated what I could do at the gym, all of those things. I think what I didn't have was love for myself in the body I was in. Even though it was a great weight and all of it, just never felt like it wasn't the 6-pack abs. It wasn't like my arms still had extra skin on them, and you know, like my boobs were nothing, because when you lose all of that weight, you don't have any more boob fat left. You know, all of those things. And so this process that the Lord's been having me on of getting pregnant with Caden, that was a surprise and not what I intended at all, and very much messed up my plans. I've talked about that many times. And I'm so glad the Lord disrupted my plans, because I needed to be disrupted. I was in a place, it's funny, our church service today was like, it was about superiority, and I was talking about the story in Daniel 4 where Daniel 4, right? Where Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and he has a dream that he doesn't know it's him, but he has a dream of a tree that grows really high, and it has all this fruit. It's so abundant, and it's taller than any of the other trees in the land. And there's a holy one that comes out from the heavens and says, this is not, you know, like cuts down the tree, essentially says, you are not going to be, we're going to scatter all your fruit. You will be a stump that is watered by the rain. You will live among the grass. And that will be for as long as it takes until you know, essentially realize. And Nebuchadnezzar thought it was about something totally different. And Daniel's like, that tree is you. It's you. You're going to get cut down, dude. Like, that's not going to be fun. And that image, ever since I read Daniel recently this year, I've been thinking about that image. And that is so depictive of what the Lord did to me. Like, he literally pruned everything, everything, and took me down to my roots. And I'm so thankful for that, because as I sit in this body right now, I am the most, I am learning to love my body where it is at. I am also learning, how do you have goals and aspirations to be healthier and treat your body well with food and exercise and all of those pieces, and not shame yourself into changing. Right. And so this journey for me of reconnecting, it's really been a journey of reconnecting my body, my mind, and my spirit all together, and my heart. And, really focusing on health God's way.
Yeah. And as you were talking, this thought came to mind that we can make really, really drastic changes about ourselves or our lives that are driven out of pain that has not been tended to.
Yep.
And we can create some really impressive results on the outside. But if the core thing that has driven that change is something that is, I don't want to say negative, but if it is something that is an unhealed wound.
I would even say fear.
Yeah, out of fear.
Like for me, a lot of those decisions that I made were fear-based.
Right. Yep.
Looking back on them now, like even when I reached a healthy weight for myself, I was really scared of gaining the weight back.
Right. And the problem that comes up when we do something, people say fear is a great motivator, and it is, but it's not a sustaining motivator.
That's true.
It's kind of like gasoline on a fire. It is not the kindling to your life. And so you will create a really big explosion of progress or results or something really impressive. However, part of the process of healing sometimes is allowing, when you remove this fearful root or this really painful root that has driven your success, you might feel like you're out where life like stalls or moves backwards a little bit. And the opportunity and the invitation in that is then to move forward and say, what does it look like to experience the healing? What does it look like to experience the life that I want from a place of healing, not from a place of my pain?
Right.
And that's, to me, what it sounds like, what you're describing, that the Lord is just journeying you through now, is like, how do I love who I am, where I am, this body that God has given me, and how do I still want things for myself and not be driven by fear, right? But like be able to be driven by, like you said, God's way. Like, what is God's way that He wants me to walk this journey out? And that applies to us all in our lives in every facet. It is every aspect of our life that we can approach that way.
And it's funny, today I was like arrested by the part where he talks about the stump being watered by the dew, and being fed by the animals, right. And just the life that Nebuchadnezzar had to live humbly
to get him to the point where
he was devoted to the Lord. And I think that is, as we wrap up this episode, that is the process I'm being invited to by the Lord, is what does this life look like when I am not trying to do God's job? Right. And for so much of my life, I was trying to do God's job. I was trying to provide for myself. I was trying to make sure my life was okay. I was trying to make sure our finances were okay and our marriage was okay. And the weight of that provision is crushing.
Yeah.
Like, we can't provide for ourselves in any capacity. We can't. And if we're trying to, we're going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And it will fall apart.
Yeah.
That's the sad part. I'm just learning that the Lord humbles those who, and Nebuchadnezzar had a chance. I mean, go back.
He could have humbled himself.
He could have humbled himself.
Yeah.
He had 12 whole months where the Lord didn't do anything, and he just let him make a decision. And when Nebuchadnezzar didn't make the decision, he cut down his tree, man.
And it's hard for us to see that as God's care, right? But God loved Nebuchadnezzar so much that He was like, I'm not going to let you keep doing this.
Right.
Like, you have influence, you have authority, you have power that I've given you, and you are using it to glorify yourself, and it will crush you. And so I will let it come like to the point of killing you, but I won't let it kill you.
And
right.
What's funny is when I look back on, my health journey, so to speak, it started off very connected with the Lord, and it ended up when I was cut down. The Lord knew, hey, this has gotten away from what we intended it to be.
This is something I gave you, and now it's become.
And I'm also seeing now, the Lord will build again. He will rebuild
and better, right? It's like
so much better.
The same thing.
So
if you're watching
much
the
better
video right now, you can see this, but it's the same piece here, right?
This is a piece of kintsugi art. You got to walk them through what you're holding.
So it's kintsugi art, which we talk about a lot because it's kind of the imagery of this ministry the Lord's given us. But it is Japanese pottery where they intentionally break the pottery and then they lace it together with gold. And it's to accentuate the cracks because the message behind that is like the cracks are these beautiful parts of our story that often we want to hide.
Mm-hmm.
And we're notorious for that in the church, in the Christian church, of wanting to hide our flaws. But I think sometimes what we don't think about is sometimes this pottery is going to get broken more than once.
Right.
Like something can be built and there might be pieces that need to be broken off again to reveal, like there's
pieces that don't ever go back.
Right.
Like right now I'm holding
design.
Up the bowl and there's an intentional piece that was not there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually such a cool, like, peekaboo.
Yep.
Into there's purpose behind all of our cracks. There's purpose behind.
Yeah.
And when we choose to humble ourselves to the Lord and what he has for us, he really will restore so much better than we think is possible. And I've seen that in the last 2 years, the freedom I was always looking for and having my situation be solved actually came from me surrendering instead.
Right.
It came from me being willing to be in that lowly place of a stable instead of a stage, right? And from that stable place, that mucky place, that, there's such purpose in the fact that Jesus came in a stable. Like he came in the middle of the mess.
Yeah.
And when you choose to get in the middle of your messes, when you choose to just look and say what is about your story and your life and your marriage, and God honors that.
Yeah.
That's where he can glorify himself.
Yeah.
Because we say, God, I can't do this, and you can. Like you have the power, you have the love, you came and gave us something that we couldn't give ourselves, salvation.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I am just learning to walk in now, is like, what does it look like for me to acknowledge all of these hurts and hangups and hardships?
Yeah.
And invite God into them with me as I walk them, and as you guys know, I've been struggling with, lots of health issues. Like I can't, for the life of me, cannot figure out how to lose my weight. And that's been really frustrating. And I think God's been really purposeful in that, like I feel like he's just really been waiting for me to invite him into that process with me.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for the resources that he has given me to show me that he wants to walk this with me.
Right.
He doesn't just want me to do it on my own and then show up and be like, hey God, look what I did.
Thanks for your help.
Here I am. But, but it's just another journey of learning to trust him.
Yeah.
And learning to invite him in.
It's so good. Talked about a lot of really good things today. Thanks for sharing, sweetie.
Thank you.
I always love hearing what the Lord's doing in your heart and just things. He speaks so many good things to you that I love to learn from. Learned a lot about him because of you, or because of him in you. I guess your willingness to be surrendered to him. So, obviously there's a lot more. So we could have dived in. There were probably like 5 topics in there we could have done a whole episode on, and we probably have in the past or will in the future. So a couple of things. If there's anything from today's episode that resonated with you, that struck you, that whether it struck you well or it struck you in a hard way, right? Either you're feeling angry after this episode or you're feeling seen, whatever it might be. If you just have questions, you want to talk, you want to process, you want to know more, always feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at restoredlivingministries@gmail.com. Super simple. You can send us on our website. There's a contact us link. You can click there. It'll send us an email as well. Or
restoredliving.org/contact.
Yep. Or you can go on Instagram and just DM us. Some of you like to do that, and that's fine too. But we know sometimes when we share this story, it can bring up questions for people, either because they're going through something similar, or because they know someone who is, or they're just like curious about some of the things that we shared. So feel free to reach out. We're always happy to answer questions or just have a conversation. Two, I would say if this sort of thing's for you, and you're feeling a little bit undone or a little bit kind of like discombobulated. Triggered is a cultural word at the moment for it. First of all, take a really nice deep breath. You're okay. You're safe. And that just might be a cue that your body's giving you that there is something there that needs to be tended to. And so again, some of you know this, some of you don't, but we do come alongside individuals and couples and navigate with them their life through a trauma-informed, biblically sound, spirit-led lens. So when we coach and work with people, we are not just going off of the clinical world, and we're not just going off of giving you verses to read and telling you to pray more. Although those are great things, we are coming to you led by the Holy Spirit, sound biblically, but clinically informed and trained to walk through some of these things with you. And so if you feel like you're needing that, feel free to reach out to us. That is what we are here to do. That's what the Lord has called and asked us to do. And so we are obedient in that, and it's our joy. And the people that we do get to work with, we always, every time we're done talking with any of them, we're just like, man, this is so necessary and so needed. And so just know that that's available to you. So feel free to reach out to us. We can schedule a time to talk with you guys and just hear more about what you're needing, whether it's you or you and a spouse or whatever it might be. Other than that, again, we we love you guys. This is all for him and for you guys. And so we're just grateful that you would take the time to listen to what the Lord's done and is doing. And we're excited for what he has ahead. And thanks again, sweetie, for sharing with us today.
Oh, thanks, babe. That was my honor. And thank you guys for listening and following the podcast, liking and sharing the podcast, and giving financially to the ministry. It really does. This work we do isn't done without you.
Nope.
And so we're just following obediently a call on our lives to share what we've learned. And we hope that this blessed you today and that you can go live today restored.
All right. Take care, guys. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Staring out the window pane, the harder that I try.